Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. Today's date is 5/9, just like we strive to bring you 5/9s of quality AppSec news and interviews every week. Which means this week we talk with Christoph Nagy from Security Bridge about bringing AppSec to business systems without bringing down the business. Then, in the news segment, code correctness in contracts, security tooling and cryptography, passwords and Heroku, documents with too many ands, and more. Dress to the nines and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. It's the show to learn the latest tools, techniques, and processes necessary to understand DevOps, application security, and cloud security. Your trusted source for the latest application security news. It's time for Application Security Weekly.
SUSE.io makes security tools for everyone. SUSE's flat rate pricing means you can set up SCA and DAST tools for your whole team. No seat counts, no scan limits, and you never have to talk to a salesperson. SUSE integrates with all common CI/CD platforms and supports most popular package managers. And thanks to SUSE's open source vulnerability scanner, license management suite, and SBOM generation capability, you can get back to what you really want to be doing, coding in no time. Visit securityweekly.com/SUSE.
This is episode 196, recorded May 9th, 2022. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello, John.
Yes, you are here with me. Happy Monday. Hope everyone's doing well.
Happy Monday indeed. Hopefully everyone is 5/9s in ham radio speak for you other nerds out there. And for you other nerds who are coming into San Francisco for the RSA Conference 2022, you can save $100 on your conference pass. As I mentioned, it will be live in San Francisco June 9th, June 6th through 9th. And Security Weekly will be there in full force, delivering real-time live coverage and interviewing some of the event's top speakers and sponsors. Register with our discount code by visiting securityweekly.com/RSAC2022 and using the code 52UCyber. We'll see you there. Plus, don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to 5/9s that's billions of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. Christoph Nagy has 20 years of working experience within the SAP industry. He has utilized this knowledge as a founding member and CEO at Security Bridge, a global SAP security provider serving many of the world's leading brands and now operating in the US. Prior to Security Bridge, Nagy applied his skills as an SAP technology consultant at Adidas and Audi. Hello, Christoph. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here on the show today.
We're excited to have you here because on the one hand, we haven't talked, I think, enough at all about internal enterprise systems. And I think we're going to discover a little bit of foreshadowing here is that SAP almost has an encapsulation of a lot of the application security principles we often talk about on the show and everything. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about SAP, perhaps what SAP is, and it's important to enterprises, and importance to organizations, because it can be a really, really nice target for attackers for many reasons.
Absolutely, Mike. And to be frank, if I go too much in detail in explaining what SAP is, I fear that that we are losing a lot of participants today. So I'll try to keep it as easy as possible. So, SAP is a software manufacturer that is actually the world leader for enterprise critical business applications, and those are ranging from ERP, enterprise resource planning, to HR, human resource management, or of course also supply chain management and so on. So you get all flavor of business or enterprise software from the SAP product portfolio. And I try to, when I say I want to have it as a simple explanation, I try to envision SAP as being the operation system for enterprises. So you can basically have every enterprise critical process replicated or supported by an SAP system, from sales to, as I said, supply chain management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's this massive amount of data that's going to hit all of three parts of the CIA triad. We want it obviously confidential. There's, material information, business secrets in there, right? Has to be the integrity of the data. And of course, it also needs availability. I think one of those aspects as well is that a lot of times John and I will talk to someone and there's talking about the collaboration with the software engineering team, a lot of coordination there. But I think in these systems, I think it sounds like we've talked before about who's actually responsible for the security of these systems. Because you could say maybe it's the CISO, but there's a big difference between who's responsible on paper and in practice. So what's a little bit of just the complexity of the organizational side of answering that question?
Well, you're actually addressing the point directly, or hitting the nail on the head. So SAP is very versatile, but with power also complexity rises. So as you just said, you can develop on the SAP system, so you can have customization and real own development, custom coding on there. But there's also the hardening need, the secure configuration need. You also have to deal with integration a lot, because for everyone that envisions SAP as being just one box, that's entirely wrong. So we do have customers that run 500 SAP instances, and they are all interconnected, and they need to communicate to each other. Now, to your question, who is responsible? So you probably have to have one responsible within every area of responsibility, from coding, custom coding, to integration, to authorization management and secure configuration. And of course, as you just said it, then there may be the head of information security feeling overall responsible to increase the security posture of SAP. But here, not seldomly, the problem also starts because this is not a router. This is not a an endpoint device or something. It's very specific. So the SAP teams, they are typically closer to the business than to the tech teams in the organization, and so it's not always easy to connect the information security practices that you have and standards like NIST cybersecurity framework or whatever the organization wants to apply, to just bring it over to the SAP organization and tell them now work according to the standards. That's not always happening.
Well, that's got to be then some complexity in how, not only just how they're configured, but it sounds like there's so much customization that customization is also unique to each individual business vertical, or possibly even a silo, which is, already sounds like an anti-pattern. One of my first thoughts with dealing with data is always just who's authorized to access it. But it sounds like there's a lot more security concerns. There's a lot more you have to pay attention to in these types of systems beyond just pure authorization. So what are these things that come to mind when you start working with organizations to figure out, okay, maybe we know who's responsible, but now we got to figure out what to do?
Exactly. So, just to give you a brief understanding on which dimensions are needed to be covered for cybersecurity of SAP, there's the hardening or the vulnerability management. You need to do regular patching, which is also very, very critical. You need to look into your interfaces, and you also need to understand what is going on in those enterprise critical systems, because there could be anomalies, there could be already intruders in the system that are manipulating data, gaining access to sensitive data. And as you rightfully said, there is tons of sensitive data. There's employee data, there's the pricing routines and conditions of your customers, the entire vendor master is there. There's tons of good material for attackers and also for espionage. If you want to look at trade secrets and so on, that is also a very important aspect that you don't want to. At any cost, you'd want to avoid this information leaving your secure premises. And
one of the interesting. Go ahead.
And of course, you always want to avoid data extraction also into shadow IT, like unshielded shares and stuff like that. So you also need to have an insight into what is leaving your secure premises. And this is where Security Bridge actually comes in. So Security Bridge covers this entire stack, as I just said it. We are looking at malicious activities. We also tell you, or the customers, which configuration glitches are existing to establish a solid hardening. We use baselining for that. And patches, of course, that's super important. I'm not getting tired of evangelizing patch your SAP systems. It's unfortunately not like the Windows update where you tick the box and then the updates are getting deployed, because SAP systems are a lot more complex. They exist in multiple stacks for the development purpose, for the test purpose, and then for the production instance. And not seldomly, they are so business critical that the production instances, at least, need to run 24/7. And then it's, you need to work with planned maintenances and so on. And you can't just do emergency patching whenever you want. I mean, you can probably, but the business will not reward you for that.
Good luck.
What's sort of interesting about this is no matter whatever aspect of this whole puzzle we talk about, Mike was asking around how does the organization get affected? I'm guessing also, so this isn't a question I want to ask, but just comment on that. Depending on pretty much any org, I'm guessing, that's going to be running SAP, that they're big enough that they need SAP, they've got change management processes in place, right? So as you're just saying, you don't just patch, you have to go to the board, blah, 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 all this sort of crazy stuff, which most of us hopefully don't have to deal with anymore. But what I did want to bring up, speaking of this complexity, and you were talking about, you gave an example around code for cost calculation, I think it was. One of the interesting things to me about SAP is, at least on the front end, it's its own programming language, right? It's Java on the back, but most of my understanding. But so while it's usually hard to find a security person or an AppSec person, it's probably going to be even harder still to find someone who actually has familiarity with ABAP. Would that ring true to you, or?
Well, I mean, exactly how you say it. I mean, it's not only Java; it's ABAP-based language. Actually, translates into C++ and on execution level. But there are Java-based systems. So you're absolutely right on that. What is super important is the change management aspect of it. Of course, bigger organizations, they typically don't run that agile. They're trying to go into the DevOps kind of setup. But typically then they don't get as agile as they want to be. And a lot of organizations that we are talking to, they are still running on industrialized release concept that allows them to have a downtime every quarter where they then also deploy their customization, the new deployments, and so on. And to the last point that you made, it's really hard to find SAP security experts. So you find someone that has SAP basis, like configuration and installation of SAP systems experience. But then those people are missing sometimes the development skill that is also needed to understand, at least if you want to secure a SAP system holistically. And that's why also the SAP organization within your IT division is typically segmented into those multiple areas of responsibility, because they have a different focus. And even harder is it because the SAP organization within the IT is like the Galilean village. They do have still their own shield. They still speak their own language. And they are not always adhering to what Caesar commands. Yeah? So they do a bit what they want in their own ecosystem. And that is also a challenge for the enterprises if they want to come to standardization and so on. And that's why also Security Bridge tries to translate SAP-specific information and insights into universal, understandable messages that a security analyst from the SOC team, for instance, can also work with it, similar to the SAP team.
Yeah, that sounds to me, especially on you were pointing out like a quarterly cadence. This suddenly seems like a jarring screech and halt to this is the record scratch to say, wait, what? Because we've gotten out of that idea of a quote unquote DevOps type of mentality, just to say we can release on a daily basis, or we'll have feature flags or things like that to make this easier. So I think that you mentioned patching. So that's a very clear, very direct, important aspect, technical aspect of maintaining security. Hopefully, as John mentioned, there are at least robust policies or processes around change management. But from a security perspective, how do you see organizations try to successfully adapt to protecting these types of complex systems that can't move so quickly? And here I'm thinking of in the sense of, can they move to some type of DevOps approach? Is it more of you would love to push more on SAP just so those secure defaults, so those defaults are actually more secure, so your baseline of checks shrinks from a few dozen maybe down to just a few? What would that look like in terms of an organization to try to do this in a modern approach to security?
Yeah. Maybe let's do it one by one, because now you opened a very wide area. So, of course, organizations trying to go into a DevOps mode with a very agile process that they can fix and deploy easier. The problem is not seldomly that the patches can also break something if you only look at security patching. So you always need to bring them to the test instance, and then you need to sometimes even involve your business teams to get a user acceptance test running, so that you're at least clear on your core business processes are not impacted by the patch. Yeah, of course, that shouldn't be the case, and SAP has invested significant amount of time and innovation in the past years in that. So it's a lot better now. But still, there is a golden standard that says never deploy anything before you have tested it to the production instance, because it may break something. The other aspect that I want to highlight is that with patching, you need to be fast. So every second Tuesday of a month, SAP has a so-called security patch day where they release security-related patches. And we see a lot of times that shortly after the patch day, we already find POC scripts, tests, not working exploits, obviously, but let's say the starting point of a working exploit already on GitHub. Yeah, you don't even need to go into the darknet searching for that. So you basically, as a SAP customer, you're anyway set up for a race after the patches have been released until you patch it. Of course, there are other measures that you can apply. You can shield your network. You can segment your network. You can provide, for instance, or bring your SAP instances in a segment that is again protected with IPS, that maybe even has some SAP-specific detection on it. We are, for instance, in alliance with Fortinet. They have in the FortiGate next generation firewall, they have literally thousands of SAP-specific checks that also help you to increase the barrier. And this is what I really like to emphasize, and where I want to make my point is you cannot assume that this reactive approach to patching is the ultimate standard. I mean, I think everyone on your show knows Log4j, and also the SAP customers have gone through a rough time just before Christmas, where no one wants stress in jobs. They always want to have silent time with their families. But of course, they had to then react real quick, because CISA, CERT, the German BSI, they all raised the red flag. And particularly for the enterprise critical systems, you can't neglect this. You can't avoid the patch. Now, I think what we need to accept is that there is a new normal. If that such scenarios can happen anytime again, and you need to revise your methodology or your security methodology based on those new standards, and find the best level of protection that works for you. And I'm just saying, shouting out a few measures that you can apply. This is regular patching for sure, but also applying a security hardening policy to your SAP system, and gaining actionable insight that allows you to understand which risk do you currently run with your SAP systems. And you need to understand, as an owner of an SAP system, how relevant is it to the business? Which data is there? Is there secret data? Is there only confidential data in the system? And what would happen if the system is down because of an attack? Or what would happen if data is actually exfiltrated from the system unseen? Yeah. So you need to also take this into your consideration and apply then according measures to that.
Yeah, you mentioned patching, for example, as a priority that's necessary but not sufficient. And there, just at the end, you were starting to basically describe, a risk management approach to your data, to these systems. So one of the classic traps that organizations can run into, they can acknowledge and say, okay, we figured out who might be responsible for this, or who we think is responsible, and perhaps what they should do. So you start with some monitoring, some analysis, and you start with a unhardened configuration for a system like this, and suddenly they have a massive amount of a to-do list. Now they have, years worth of effort potentially. So how do you then navigate that so you get into useful priorities that are risk informed, so you can say, yes, we do need to patch, but by the way, we need to do maybe these 2 or 3 other things first before we do the 200 or 300 that are on this list?
That's actually a real challenge for SAP customers doing it with manual labor or with resources. First and foremost, you need so much expertise in your team, and they need to have the management backup to spend the amount of time to analyze this. That's why Security Bridge could provide this out of the box. So we apply basically to every finding a categorization. The categorization, how easy or how likely it is that such a vulnerability that we found, configuration glitch or open loopholes in your security posture, can be exploited. But also next to that, we also classify how hard it is or how complex it is to resolve this issue. And based on that, you can basically build your own security program for SAP with a roadmap that focuses on the low-hanging fruits with a lot of leverage and a lot of effect in the beginning. And this is also how we make sure that the investment in security, and I think I don't need to say that 100% security doesn't exist, is always adequate with the risk appetite that an organization can run with, and also in accordance with other security measures that are in place to shield the SAP system. We need to distinguish between SAP systems that are internet-facing. We need to distinguish between SAP systems that are really behind in your secure premises. Well, and of course now with the cloudification, many SAP systems are running in a hyperscaler cloud. So here you also need to make specific assumptions and measures that help you to protect the SAP systems from outsiders, but also insiders.
It's funny, I was just about to ask about SAP Cloud. How does that affect significantly the work that you and your team has to do to secure on-prem versus the cloud product?
That's a good question. You need to separate the question in 2 parts. One would be a closed cloud product. So there are SAP products that are really closed cloud products, similar to Salesforce or something, where you only can apply some customization and a limited amount of coding, for instance. But when we talk of SAP in the cloud, the majority is just hosting is maybe not the word that the hyperscalers want to hear, but it's running SAP in a hyperscaler environment. And here you need to definitely consider how you connect the networks, how you can bring your on-premise systems into a situation that they can talk to the SAP systems that are running in the hyperscaler cloud, in a cloud environment. you need to make your own assumptions on which systems you want to run on hyperscaler clouds or which systems you want to keep in your secure premises. And the adoption is huge. So I think we are really in a hybrid cloud environment already, or age when it comes to SAP only. Of course, customers are sensitive putting their crown jewelry into cloud environments, to say it like this. But the adoption is great, and more is coming. But don't forget, it's not making things simpler at the first place. Of course, you can deploy hardware as software, that's clear, and it gives you a lot more scalability and flexibility. But when it comes to security, complexity arises, and with more complexity, there may be more white spots that you are not monitoring, or problems that can arise that malicious threat actors can exploit.
Some of what was interesting to me about the discussions around this is that there was a very large presence of process that was necessary. Now, process can also be either, call it the scary word or the bad word, depending on your tolerance for it, perhaps. But like you're describing just now, the technical aspects of, cloud versus on-prem, does it make it easier? What does that change, perhaps, in terms of the technical approach to hardening it, being able to build architectures around it? But we touched a little bit on change management. Maybe we don't need to go and define what a good change management process looks like. But earlier, Christoph, you also mentioned, for example, Log4j, or even just the need to patch. And I'm going to guess every second Tuesday, one of these Tuesdays has a critical kernel patch, has a critical patch that you really have to install. So how do you see organizations, how much do they have to invest in processes around runbooks to deal with these types of situations more easily, rather than just being like, oops, it's Log4j, we've got an emergency, what the heck are we going to do, because we've never dealt with this before?
Unfortunately, I have to say, not every organization, when it comes to SAP, is up to the mark of the security standard. So it actually appeared to us that a lot of organizations have asked us for help, and our experts' opinion on the Log4j incident. And so it appears to me that not all the playbooks that you wish are existing, and that they then do kind of an emergency approach to it. Yeah, it needs a lot of processes, as you rightfully stated, when it comes to the change management, because you need to patch first in the development system, then you need to deploy the change that you have made, and not always it's just an simple install. You also need to have pre and post operation or adjustment in your environment. You need to consider whether this function is used and to which degree it is used. And there are certain choices to make when you import a patch. But there's also some patches that can't just be imported during runtime, that need a downtime. So, and that is also a challenge for the organizations to master this when they have a 24/7 system with a 99% availability. Probably for such a incident like the Log4j vulnerability, they made an excuse, but then you can't do this continuously and regularly, because the business they can't create sales orders, for instance, or they can't create or run the value stream of your organization if the SAP systems are not available.
I guess that's at least, to reach for a silver lining there. It does seem at least that you can actually quantify pretty effectively what the impacts are of, availability of your SAP system is down, or the impacts of the integrity is gone. Because as you said, there's a lot, there's sales, there's money, there's logistics behind this that gets significantly impacted. Do you see that, as I make up this, possibly over-optimistic statement, do you see that actually translating into these risk discussions or helping out CISOs when they're saying, look, this is a X $1 million, $1 billion impact that this system can have. We need to spend some percentage of time and effort securing that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a trend towards application security, and that's probably, and this is my humble opinion on it, is because most of the organizations have reached a maturity level that they cover their infrastructure and their endpoints to a certain degree, and in the next stage, the CISO, the head of information security, asks, "Where's my risk? Where are my business critical systems, and what would happen if an SAP system that is responsible for supply chain management in a just-in-time production or something? What would happen if that system is not available, unplanned for a period of hours?" And my bet is, because no customer or no SAP customer runs SAP just for the sake of it, it always fulfills a business intent, that an SAP system, specific SAP systems, may range in the top 10, maybe in the top 5 of the enterprise critical applications if the customers are running SAP in their environment. And now, as I said in the beginning, the challenge starts. The CISO now wants to connect to the SAP department, doesn't know how the SAP department is structured, doesn't know about all the security dimensions that need to be covered. And authorization concept, every organization, they have authorization concept. But when it comes to cybersecurity, you also need to address custom code security. You need to have the patch management. You need real-time threat detection and a sufficient security posture when it comes to hardening, and an insight that nothing gets changed throughout the change management process. That's basically also the drawback of being too agile. If you change something that has a security impact, you also need to know this. So you need to continuously surveil the hardening posture of your SAP systems too. And now with Security Bridge, we also help CISOs to do this, because they typically have a SOC, Security Operations Center. They want to connect to SAP. There's no standard interface, unfortunately. And Security Bridge provides such a standard interface. And not only that, we also separate the transactional noise from the SAP systems that resides in the logs of the SAP systems from all those logs before we provide it to the SOC and to the security analysts. And of course, content enrichment and translation is also a very essential point of bridging the gap that we see there between the departments and the collaboration in the internal teams. And I have to say here, I think every organization has the right people, that they just need to work effectively and efficient together, and that's not always what we see out there.
And it's possibly not unique to SAP environments either. There's that sounds like a universal human challenge of interactions. I want to turn one final question, turn back a little bit to the technical aspects, and just with maybe a parting question or two. You're working with SAP, you're looking at SAP. What are some things that you, with an eye towards how SAP has their default configurations, its own internal architecture is designed, if you could wave a wand or make a wish, are there one or two things that you really wish would change in the default stance, the default design of SAP, that would just be better for the entire ecosystem around it?
Well, if I make a wish, I think, and SAP is already doing this, so I think you need to give them a bit of time, that they invest more and they come up with more security by design and by default methodologies. I give you an example. In the past, when you installed an SAP system, and we'd still find those old systems in the wild, then certain standard users with God mode authorization, they existed with a password that you find on the internet. And unless the customer has actually actively changed this, you can still log in with this password. And now you need to know that those systems, they are upgraded continuously. And if customers are just not paid any attention to security, then you can still just log in and do whatever you want in the systems. SAP has changed this already. And what I really want to highlight here is we are an SAP partner, and we're also working together with SAP in specific dimensions. We'll provide input, what is needed from the field, what customers do demand. And this is really good because SAP customers, partners, and SAP itself, there are communities. There's the ASUG, the American SAP user group. There's the German SAP user group, where we are exchanging the needs, and SAP provides the progress.
No, it does sound like at least there's a positive direction, so we can get beyond those hard-coded or those default passwords. What's something else we can look forward to in the future from Security Bridge, or just from the ecosystem around SAP? Give us something more to look forward to than just having to change those default passwords.
Oh, there's a lot. So you need to see SAP is in a rapid transformation. They are, everyone that knows SAP still memorizes as this proprietary client-server application. SAP is investing significantly in new UIs using HTML5 technology, and so on. It also comes with security challenges, but it's a great outlook, and makes the system more accessible, new services that you can provide on mobile devices and stuff like that. And those need to be, of course, also adequately secured.
So it sounds like a good challenge and a good rich opportunities for AppSec for many years to come. So thank you for that, Christoph. That was a great conversation.
It was a pleasure.
Also want to thank John. Thank everybody who's been hanging out, listening to us in the Discord channel as well. We are going to take a quick break now, and then we'll return with News of the Week.